A simple man, a dream purchase, and a customer service experience that revealed much more than prices and specifications. What should have been a routine purchase became a great lesson about hasty judgments. In the end, who really lost out? The key. Sun mercilessly beat down on the dirt road as Pete Miller parked his old Ford F-150 in front of the largest dealership in Oakville. At 28 years old, his face bore the marks of hard work and the determination of someone who knew the value of every cent earned. His dusty boots and worn jeans told the story of someone who wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty to achieve his goals. Green Valley Farm, his father's legacy, had transformed over the past 5 years. When Pete took over the property, he revolutionized production with modern planting and management techniques. Where there was once just a small cornfield, now stood a thriving empire of soybeans and coffee, with automated irrigation systems and a fleet of machines that was the pride of the region. As he entered Premium Vehicles dealership, the icy air conditioning contrasted with the scorching heat outside. The environment was sophisticated, with gleaming marble floors and luxury cars displayed under strategically positioned lights. The salespeople, all in suits and ties, circulated among the vehicles like peacocks showing off their plumage. "Can I help you?" The nasal voice, laden with disdain, came from Richard Alden, a middle-aged salesman who approached with visible reluctance. His eyes scanned Pete's simple clothes with poorly disguised disapproval. "Yes, I'm here to see the new Frontier Limited," Pete replied calmly, holding the salesman's gaze. Richard let out a short, dry laugh. "Young man, that one costs almost $200,000. Perhaps you'd like to see something more suitable for your profile." Pete kept his composure. Years of negotiations with international buyers had taught him the value of patience. "No, thank you. I want to see that specific model." In another corner of the store, a young woman observed the scene with interest. Mary Thompson, recently hired as sales manager, had taken up the position just 2 weeks ago. Coming from Chicago with an impressive background in the automotive sector, she was determined to revolutionize the culture of this traditionalist dealership. "Look, I'll be honest with you," Richard continued, his tone now closer to mockery. "That car over there is for a specific type of customer, executives, businessmen, people who can actually afford it. How about we take a look at some used models?" It was at this moment that Mary decided to intervene. She approached with firm steps, her impeccable suit and professional posture contrasting with Richard's disdainful attitude. "Good morning, Miss Thompson," Richard greeted, clearly uncomfortable with the new manager's approach. "Good morning, Richard, and good morning to you, sir." Mary addressed Pete with a genuine smile. "Pete Miller," he replied, immediately noticing the difference in approach. "Mr. Miller, I'm Mary Thompson, sales manager. Please come with me. I'll be happy to personally show you the new Frontier." Richard was left behind, chewing his frustration as Mary led Pete to the vehicle. She began a detailed presentation, explaining each feature with impressive technical knowledge. The engine is a 2.3 bi-turbo with 190 horsepower, 4x4 drive with low range, ideal for fieldwork. The interior has premium leather finish, Mary explained with genuine enthusiasm. Pete listened attentively, asking pertinent questions that demonstrated his knowledge of vehicles. Mary realized she was dealing with someone who understood much more than his appearance suggested. "You know a lot about cars," Pete commented, impressed. "Please call me Mary, and yes, I grew up in an auto shop. My father taught me everything about engines before I even learned to drive." She smiled, remembering her childhood days. "And you seem to understand quite a bit about the subject too." "I learned out of necessity. On the farm, if a tractor breaks down in the middle of harvest, you can't wait for the mechanic to come from town." The conversation was flowing naturally when they were interrupted by August Mendoza, the dealership owner. A corpulent man in his 60s, known for his traditionalist stance and for treating the dealership like an exclusive club. "Mary, we need you in the meeting with the investors." His deep voice carried an authority that brooked no argument. "Mr. Mendoza, I'm in the middle of an important customer interaction," Mary responded, maintaining her professionalism. "Richard can continue from here," August declared, casting a quick, disinterested glance at Pete. "The investors can't wait." Mary hesitated for a moment, looking from Pete to August. "Mr. Miller, I'm sorry, but—" "Don't worry," Pete gently interrupted. "I appreciate your attention up to this point." As soon as Mary walked away, Richard resumed the service with his artificial smile. "So, want to take a test drive in one of our used cars?" "No, thank you," Pete replied, already heading towards the exit. "I think I'll look for a dealership where respect isn't a privilege for the few." As he reached his old truck, Pete was surprised by Mary, who had managed to quickly extricate herself from the meeting. "Mr. Miller, wait!" She caught up with him in the parking lot, a business card in hand. "There's a dealership in Springfield, 40 minutes from here. The manager is my friend, Daniel Santos. He'll treat you the way you deserve." Pete took the card, a sincere smile lighting up his tired face. "Thank you, Mary. You know, it's ironic. I came here prepared to make a cash purchase, but I ended up gaining something more valuable: the certainty that appearances can be deceiving, for better or worse." Mary watched the truck drive away, raising dust on the dirt road. She returned to the dealership determined to bring about changes in that outdated culture. What no one there knew was that this encounter would be just the beginning of a story that would transform not only premium vehicles, but the entire town of Oakville. In the meeting room, August Mendoza was discussing with investors about the drop in sales in recent months, unaware that he had just lost a sale that could have saved the dealership's month. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us which city you're watching. Us from will continue. The sun was already setting on the horizon when Mary Thompson left the dealership that day. Her words in the meeting with investors still echoed in her mind. "We need to modernize our approach. The market has changed, and we need to change with it." August Mendoza's frowning expression made it clear that her ideas were not welcome, but she wasn't willing to give up. At home, while reviewing the month's numbers, her phone rang. It was Daniel Santos, the manager of the Springfield dealership. "Mary, you won't believe what happened today." Daniel's voice was overflowing with enthusiasm. "That farmer you referred, he just closed the purchase of 3 trucks, cash payment." Mary smiled, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and frustration. 3? So he didn't buy just for personal use? No, Green Valley Farm is expanding. He mentioned that he plans to renew the entire fleet in the coming months. "Mary, we're talking about a client that could generate millions in sales." The news hit like a bomb. That could have been the biggest sale of the year for premium vehicles, but prejudice and arrogance had cost them dearly. Mary thanked him for the call and remained thoughtful, planning her next steps. The next morning, the dealership was buzzing with the news. Richard, who had found out about the sale through a friend in Springfield, looked like he had swallowed bile. His eyes flashed with anger every time he crossed paths with Mary in the corridors. "You did this on purpose!" he confronted her in the break room. "You stole my client and handed him over to the competition." Mary kept her calm, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "No, Richard, you lost the client on your own when you decided to judge him by his appearance. And it wasn't just one client, it was 3 sales, with potential for much more." The discussion was interrupted by Julia Mendoza, August's daughter, and recent business administration graduate. At 24, she had just taken a position in the management of the family business, but her progressive ideas often clashed with her father's. "What's going on here?" Julia asked, her gaze alternating between Mary and Richard. "Nothing much," Richard replied dryly, leaving the room. Julia approached Mary. "I saw the numbers from the sale in Springfield. It was that client that Richard mistreated yesterday, wasn't it?" Mary nodded, realizing in Julia a potential ally. The two women began a frank conversation about the dealership's problems. Julia revealed that the financial situation was more delicate than it seemed. Sales had been consistently falling in recent years, and her father's resistance to modernization was driving away important clients. "Mary, I need to tell you something." Julia lowered her voice, checking if there was no one around. "I found some documents in my father's office. The dealership is very close to filing for bankruptcy. If we don't reverse the situation in the coming months, we'll have to close our doors." The revelation hit Mary like a punch. It wasn't just her job at stake, but the livelihood of dozens of families. Why doesn't your father tell the team? We could work together to find solutions. You know August Mendoza. Pride is his middle name, Julia sighed. He'd rather sink with the ship than admit he needs help. At that moment, August entered the room, interrupting the conversation. His countenance was more burdened than usual. Julia, Mary, in my office, now. In the office, August got straight to the point. I just received a very interesting call. He fixed his gaze on Mary. Pete Miller, the farmer who was here yesterday, is one of the largest soybean producers in the state. Green Valley Farm made over $50 million last year. The silence that followed was as heavy as lead. Mary could see the gears turning in August's head, the realization of the size of the loss that his prejudice had caused. Mary, he continued, his voice more controlled, I want you to lead a restructuring project for our sales team. Training, new service protocols, whatever is necessary. Julia couldn't contain a smile. It was the first time she had seen her father admitting, even if indirectly, the need for change. On one condition, Mary responded, surprising everyone with her boldness. I want carte blanche to implement the changes I deem necessary. No interference. August hesitated for a moment that seemed like an eternity. His pride fought against the practical need to save his business. Finally, he nodded slightly. You have 3 months to show results. Leaving the room, Mary and Julia exchanged knowing looks. The winds of change were finally beginning to blow at premium vehicles, but they knew that the real battle was just beginning. At the end of that afternoon, while organizing her notes, for the restructuring project, Mary received an unexpected message. It was a photo of Pete Miller next to his 3 new trucks with a message. Thanks for the recommendation. By the way, I was thinking about expanding the business to Oakville. How about a coffee to talk about it? Mary smiled, realizing that fate sometimes works in mysterious ways. The story that had begun with a loss could turn into the salvation of the dealership. But for that, she would need to face not only the resistance to change, but also the shadows of the past that were beginning to emerge in her life. The Sierra Cafe, a charming establishment in downtown Oakville, was particularly quiet that Thursday morning. Mary chose a table near the window where she could observe the movement in the central square while waiting for Pete Miller. Her hands firmly held a folder full of documents, the outline of the restructuring project for premium vehicles. Sorry, I'm late. Pete's deep voice surprised her. He wore a well-pressed dress shirt and jeans, a combination that perfectly balanced professionalism with the simplicity of a country man. Traffic on the highway was complicated. Mary smiled, indicating the chair across from her. I imagine it's not as complicated as coordinating the purchase of 3 trucks in one day. 4, actually, Pete corrected, a discreet smile on his lips. I closed another deal this morning. We're really expanding the business. The waitress approached, and they placed their orders. A cappuccino for Mary and a strong black coffee for Pete. While they waited, the conversation naturally flowed to Green Valley Farm's expansion plans. We bought 2 neighboring properties, Pete explained, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. We're going to triple soybean production and start a sustainable agriculture project. That's why we need to renew the entire fleet. Mary listened attentively, making mental notes. And why the interest in Oakville specifically? Strategic. Location, Pete answered, picking up his coffee that had just arrived. The city is at the center of a growing agricultural region. I plan to open a distribution center here. The conversation was interrupted by Mary's cell phone. It was a message from Julia. Urgent. Dad discovered something about your past. He's furious. Come back to the dealership now. Mary felt her blood run cold. She knew this day would come, but she didn't expect it to be so soon. Pete, I'm sorry, but an emergency has come up at the dealership. Any problem? Pete asked, noticing the sudden change in her expression. Nothing I can't handle. She tried to smile, but the worry was evident in her eyes. Can we continue this conversation another time? Pete nodded, understanding. Of course. By the way, since you are in a hurry, I'll get straight to the point. I'm interested in partnering with premium vehicles. It would be the official supplier for Green Valley Farms' fleet, but with one condition. Mary paused in the middle of picking up her purse. What condition? That you be my exclusive consultant, Pete smiled. Your honesty and professionalism impressed me, and apparently I wasn't the only one to notice that. Upon arriving at the dealership, Mary found the atmosphere heavy. Employees were whispering in corners, and Richard was displaying a smile of satisfaction that only worsened her premonition. In August, Mendoza's office, Julia was waiting for her with a distressed expression. Mary Thompson, August's voice thundered as soon as she entered. Or should I say Mary Anderson? He threw a folder with documents on the desk. Mary immediately recognized it. It was her personal file from the old dealership where she had worked in Chicago. You've been investigating my past. Mary maintained her composure, although her heart was racing. Of course I have. Did you think I would hire someone for a position of trust without thorough research? August stood up, his imposing figure casting a shadow over the room. And do you know what I found out? That you were responsible for the biggest crisis at Auto Elite in Chicago. Julia, who had been watching the scene in silence, finally intervened. Dad, let her explain. Mary took a deep breath. It was time to face her ghosts. Yes, I reported a price inflation scheme at Auto Elite. The commercial director, along with some salespeople, was inflating prices and pocketing the difference. When I discovered it, I took the evidence to the administrative board. And you managed to shut down one of the most traditional dealerships in Chicago, August vociferated. No, Mr. Mendoza, Mary kept her voice firm. The dealership closed. Because the scheme had corroded its finances for years. I just exposed the truth. And now you want to do the same here? Is that why you've been snooping around the accounting books with my daughter? Dad, Julia protested. Mary is trying to help us. Or do you prefer to pretend we're not on the brink of bankruptcy? The silence that followed was deafening. August let himself fall heavily into his chair, suddenly looking much older and tired. Mary, he spoke after a long moment, you have 1 hour to clear your desk. No! Julia slammed her hand on the desk. If you fire Mary, I'm leaving too. And good luck explaining to the investors why you lost the professional who managed to bring the biggest client of the year to the competition. What client? August asked, confused. Pete Miller just offered me a partnership, Mary revealed. Green Valley Farm wants to make premium vehicles its official vehicle supplier, a contract that could save the dealership. With one condition, she continued, taking advantage of August's moment of hesitation. That I be the responsible consultant. So, Mr. Mendoza, the choice is yours. Do you want to save your pride or your company? The office plunged into a tense silence. August stared fixedly at the city through the panoramic window, as if seeking answers on the horizon. Julia held her breath, while Mary remained firm, holding her boss's gaze when he finally turned to her. You have until the end of the day to present me with this restructuring project, August finally spoke, his voice carrying a mixture of resignation and respect. And I want all the details of this partnership with Green Valley Farm on my desk first thing tomorrow morning. When Mary and Julia left the room, they found Richard in the hallway, his smile of satisfaction now replaced by an expression of disbelief. He had bet all his chips on destroying Mary, but had ended up strengthening her position even more. I think we have a lot of work ahead of us, Julia commented as they walked back to Mary's office. Yes, we do, Mary agreed, a small smile appearing on her lips. And the first thing will be to teach some people that in the business world, character is worth more than appearances. What none of them knew was that that afternoon would mark only the beginning of a transformation much greater than anyone could imagine. As Mary organized her documents for the presentation, her cell phone vibrated with a new message from Peter. Forgot to mention something important at the coffee shop. There's someone else interested in the partnership, someone you know very well from New York. The week that followed at Premium Vehicles was intense. Mary barely had time to breathe between restructuring meetings, sales team training, and drafting the contract with Green Hill Farm. But it was that last message from Peter that wouldn't leave her mind. Who could this person from New York be? Her answer came on a rainy Wednesday. Mary was conducting a workshop on humanized customer service when Julia appeared at the training room door, her face as pale as if she'd seen a ghost. "Mary, there's someone waiting for you at the reception." Julia's voice trembled slightly. "It's Charles Edward Montero." The name hit Mary like lightning. Charles Edward, her former boss at Auto Elite, the man who had coordinated the entire overpricing scheme and who ended up being investigated after her complaints. How did he have the audacity to show up there? "Continue practicing the cases we discussed," Mary instructed the team, maintaining her composure. "Richard, please lead the next activity." Richard, who in recent weeks had surprisingly shown to be more collaborative, nodded. The training was having an effect even on him. At the reception, Charles Edward maintained the same elegant posture as always. His impeccable Italian suit and Rolex on his wrist were trademarks of his ostentatious style. Seeing Mary, he opened his characteristic commercial smile. "Mary, it's been a while. You're even more elegant than I remembered." "What do you want, Charles Edward?" Mary went straight to the point, maintaining a safe distance. "Straight to the point, as always," he laughed. "I heard you're handling the partnership with Green Hill Farm. It's impressive how small the world is, isn't it? Peter Johnson is my second cousin." Mary felt her stomach sink. Now she understood the game. Charles Edward was trying to use his kinship with Peter to interfere in the business. "Let's talk in my office," Mary suggested, noticing the curious glances from the employees. On the way, they encountered Augustus, who immediately recognized the visitor. "Charles Edward Montero, it's been a long time, my friend." "Augustus, my old pal." The two greeted each other like old acquaintances. "I didn't know you and Mary already knew each other." Mary observed the scene with a mixture of surprise and concern. How had she not noticed the connection before? Augustus and Charles Edward belonged to the same social circle in New York. In Mary's office, Charles Edward got straight to the point. "I came to make a proposal. Auto Elite is restructuring with new management. We want to enter the rural market, and the partnership with Green Hill Farm would be perfect for that." "You want to use your kinship with Peter to steal the contract?" Mary asked, incredulous. "On the contrary, I want to propose a triple partnership. Premium Vehicles, Auto Elite, and Green Hill Farm. You would maintain the local operation, and we would provide logistical and financial support." The proposal was tempting, especially considering the dealership's financial situation, but Mary knew Charles Edward too well to trust him. "And what's the catch?" "None. Just one small condition. You need to sign a document admitting that you were mistaken in the accusations against me 3 years ago, that you misinterpreted the data." So that was it. Charles Edward wanted to use the situation to clear the stains on his reputation. "Impossible," Mary responded firmly. "I won't deny the truth." "Mary, be reasonable." Charles Edward leaned forward. "This could save Premium Vehicles. Or would you prefer to be responsible for another dealership closing its doors?" The discussion was interrupted by a knock on the door. It was Peter Johnson who had arrived for a scheduled meeting. "Cousin Charles, what a surprise," Peter exclaimed, but his tone didn't seem very enthusiastic. "Peter, glad you're here." Charles Edward stood up to hug his cousin. "I was just proposing a partnership that will benefit everyone." Peter listened attentively as Charles Edward explained his proposal. His face, normally expressive, remained neutral. "Interesting," Peter commented at last. "But there's one problem. I already signed the exclusivity contract with Premium Vehicles last night." Charles Edward turned pale. "What do you mean, without consulting me? And why should I?" Peter asked, his voice now carrying a hint of irritation. "Cousin, I know exactly what happened at Auto Elite. In fact, that's why I specifically sought out Mary. Her reputation for integrity impressed me." Mary observed the scene, realizing that Peter had known everything from the beginning. He hadn't just chosen Premium Vehicles, he had chosen her. "You can't do this to me." Charles Edward lost his composure. "Augustus has been my friend for years. And Mary is the professional who's saving my company," Augustus's voice sounded from the door where he was standing with Julia. Charles Edward, I appreciate your proposal, but we'll stick with our original plan. Defeated, Charles Edward stood up. His face alternated between red with anger and pale with humiliation. You'll regret this. This won't be the end of it. When he left, the room plunged into a momentary silence, broken by Peter. Mary, sorry. I didn't tell you before about my kinship with Charles Edward. I needed to be sure what kind of person you really were. A test? Mary asked, still processing everything that had happened. The best kind of test, Peter smiled. The one that reveals people's character under pressure. Augustus approached Mary, his expression softer than she had ever seen. You could have accepted his proposal. It would have been the easier path. Easier but not right, Mary responded. And I've learned that in the long run, doing the right thing is always the best business. Julia, who was observing everything, with a smile added, and speaking of business, I think we have a party to organize. After all, it's not every day we close the biggest contract in the dealership's history. While everyone was celebrating, Mary received a message on her cell phone. It was from her former colleague at Auto Elite. Charles Edward just left the meeting with the investors. He's planning something big. Be careful. Mary looked out the window, watching Charles Edward's car drive away. She knew that story wasn't over yet. What she didn't know was that the real battle was just beginning, and that fate still held surprises. That would forever change not only her life, but that of everyone around her. The grand ballroom of the Riverdale Grand Hotel was magnificently decorated for the signing ceremony of the partnership between Premium Vehicles and Green Hill Farm. Tropical flower arrangements adorned the tables, and a slideshow displayed images of the new trucks already customized with the farm's logo. Mary was adjusting the final details of her presentation when Julia rushed into the ballroom. Mary, you need to see this. On Julia's cell phone screen, a headline from the country's leading financial newspaper announced, Auto Elite announces purchase of dealership network in rural areas. Charles Edward Montero promises to revolutionize the market. He bought all the dealerships in the region, Julia explained, her voice trembling slightly. Except ours. Mary felt a chill. Charles Edward's threat was starting to take shape. He planned to suffocate premium vehicles by controlling the entire distribution network around them. Where's your father? Mary asked, maintaining her calm. Locked in the makeshift office we set up here at the hotel. He's been trying to calm the investors since the news broke. The event was set to begin in less than an hour, and several important guests were already arriving. Richard, who in recent weeks had become one of the most dedicated salespeople after the training, was coordinating the reception with surprising efficiency. Mary, Peter Johnson's voice echoed through the ballroom. He was accompanied by an elegant woman whom Mary immediately recognized, Helen Montero, president of Auto Elite's board and Peter's aunt. Mrs. Montero, Mary greeted, trying to hide her surprise. Mary Torres, Helen smiled, her shrewd eyes studying every detail. Or should I say, the person who had the courage to expose my nephew Charles Edward's shenanigans. The silence that followed was tense. Peter intervened. Aunt Helen followed the whole process at Auto Elite closely. In fact, she was the one who alerted me about you. I always knew about Charles Edward's actions, Helen continued, but I needed concrete evidence. Your complaints were the final straw I needed to start cleaning up the company. Mary was beginning to understand the puzzle. So the restructuring of Auto Elite was a direct result of your act of courage, Helen completed. Unfortunately, Charles Edward still maintained some allies on the board. Until now. At this moment, Augustus joined the group, his face showing concern. Mrs. Montero, what a surprise. I imagine you're already aware of your nephew's movements. Yes, Augustus, and that's exactly why I'm here. Helen opened her briefcase and pulled out some documents. I bring a proposal that might interest everyone. In the next hour, while guests were settling in the ballroom, an intense meeting was taking place behind the scenes. When they finally emerged from the office, everyone had smiles on their faces, except Richard, who observed everything from afar with a worried expression. The ceremony began punctually. Mary took the stage to make the official presentation of the partnership. As she spoke about premium vehicles' values and the importance of integrity in business, the ballroom doors opened. Charles Edward entered, his triumphant smile freezing, when he saw his aunt seated in the front row. "And now," Mary continued unfazed, "I have the pleasure of announcing not just the partnership with Green Hill Farm, but also a historic transformation in the rural dealership market." On the screen behind her, a new logo appeared. Premium Group, a partnership between Premium Vehicles and Auto Elite. Charles Edward stood up abruptly, but Helen was quicker. "Sit down, nephew, you'll want to hear this." Mary proceeded, "Premium Vehicles and Auto Elite are joining forces today in a revolutionary joint venture. We'll maintain our administrative independence, but share resources and technology. And most importantly, our values of integrity and excellence in customer service." Augustus took the microphone. "And I'm proud to announce that Mary Torres will be the CEO of Premium Group, bringing her experience and commitment to ethics to lead this new phase." The ballroom erupted in applause. Charles Edward, livid, tried to approach the stage but was stopped by security guards. Helen approached him. "It's over, Charles Edward. The board voted for your dismissal this morning. Your retaliatory actions against Premium Vehicles were the last straw." As Charles Edward was discreetly escorted out, Richard approached Mary. "I need to confess something. Charles Edward approached me weeks ago, offering money to sabotage the training and pass information." "And you accepted?" Mary asked, already knowing the answer. "No," Richard smiled. "Your training taught me that reputation and integrity are worth more than money. And well, I guess I owe you an apology for everything." Mary extended her hand to him. "The important thing is to learn from mistakes. By the way, I'll need a training director for Premium Group, someone who knows firsthand the importance of judging less and respecting more." The party extended into the night. In a quiet moment, Peter approached Mary, who was observing the city from the ballroom's balcony. "You know what made me certain about you?" he asked. "It wasn't your competence, nor your honesty. It was your ability to see beyond appearances, whether with a poorly dressed farmer or a prejudiced salesman." Mary smiled. "Sometimes we need to give people the chance to show their best selves. And sometimes we need to have the courage to do the right thing, even when it seems impossible," Peter added. The sun was setting on the horizon of Riverdale, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. On the dirt road that cut through the town, an old pickup truck passed by, raising dust, reminding everyone that sometimes the greatest transformations begin in the most unlikely places. Dear listeners, we hope that Mary's and Premium Vehicles' story has touched your hearts. To continue this journey of transformation, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it here, clicking to your left. If you were moved by this narrative, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give the video a like. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of human relationships and the power of integrity. Don't miss our upcoming content. Share in the comments which city you're watching us from and tell us if you've ever experienced a similar situation.